March 1442. The morning fog clung stubbornly to the narrow streets of Tobruk, North Africa, muffling the distant rumble of tanks and the intermittent crackle of rifles. Dust hung thick in the air, stinging the eyes and coating every exposed surface with the scent of sand and metal. Soldiers shuffled cautiously, their boots scraping over rubble and broken masonry, nerves taut as wires. Somewhere nearby, a tank engine growled like a beast roused, its vibrations rattling the nerves of infantry who had already survived days of relentless siege. For the Allied soldiers defending Tobruk, every day was a high-stakes gamble. The desert was not only their battlefield but a crucible, testing ingenuity, courage, and sheer survival instinct. And amid this chaos, a small, unassuming object quietly emerged as a symbol of both fear and innovation: the gammon bomb. The gammon bomb was not the kind of weapon designed to impress with firepower or sheer destruction. To the untrained eye, or to skeptical officers, the device seemed almost comical. A soft, egg-shaped container, flexible, filled with a plastic explosive that could be molded to fit any space. It was lightweight, versatile, and deadly. But in early 1942, as soldiers first glimpsed this peculiar device, laughter often greeted its introduction. How could this flimsy little thing possibly stop a tank? They would ask, fingers brushing the rubbery exterior, unconvinced. Yet, history has a way of proving its lessons through the crucible of experience. The gammon bomb was born out of necessity, an ingenious response to the armored menace that dominated battlefields across Europe and North Africa. Tanks, with their thick steel shells and mounted machine guns, had made infantry a vulnerable, almost expendable force. Anti-tank rifles were cumbersome and often ineffective, and early anti-tank grenades struggled to pierce even light armor. Soldiers needed a weapon that could adapt to the chaos of urban streets, trenches, and desert outposts, something they could carry, aim, and deploy quickly. The mastermind behind the gammon bomb was Major Robert Gammon, an explosive expert working with British Special Forces research units. Operating out of makeshift laboratories in Aberdeen, Scotland, he and his team experimented with plastic explosive that could be safely carried, easily armed, and yet incredibly destructive when applied to the right target. Early prototypes were rough, sometimes too sensitive, sometimes too weak, but one innovation set this device apart: the flexible casing. Unlike rigid explosives, the gammon bomb could be squeezed into a tank tread, wedged under a turret, or packed into the smallest breach in enemy armor. It was literally a weapon shaped by the needs of the soldier in the field. Training with the device was as much psychological as practical. Soldiers had to overcome ingrained skepticism. Many veterans had spent months in North Africa, watching friends and comrades fall to German armor that seemed unstoppable. They knew the tank was the ultimate predator on the battlefield, a moving fortress of death that laughed at rifles and grenades. Yet, here was this odd, rubbery device, which some joked looked more like a children's toy than a weapon of war. The first training exercises were tense, filled with nervous chuckles and whispered doubts. "You really expect me to throw this at a tiger?" one soldier murmured, half joking, half terrified. Despite doubts, early testing produced results that began to silence the skeptics. In controlled exercises, a well-placed gammon bomb could cripple a tank's track in seconds, immobilizing it and leaving it vulnerable to follow-up attacks. The device's simplicity was its genius. Unlike cumbersome rifles or mines that required precise placement, gammon bomb could be molded, thrown, or stuck to almost any surface. And for the soldiers on the front lines, it was more than a weapon. It was hope, a chance to even the odds against a seemingly invincible enemy. The soldiers themselves played a key role in shaping its use. Small commando teams, often operating behind enemy lines, quickly adapted the device in creative ways. One account from a Royal Engineers unit described how a single soldier used a gammon bomb to disable 3 Italian armored cars in succession, each placement improvised based on the contours of the vehicle. These stories spread rapidly, carried in layers, whispered in mess halls, and eventually documented in operational reports. The bomb's reputation began to grow, quietly transforming from a laughingstock to a legend in its own right. Yet, the path from innovation to battlefield success was fraught with danger. Handling plastic explosives was risky, Accidental detonation could kill the operator instantly. Soldiers had to balance precision with speed, and every mission became a test of nerves as much as skill. The Gammon Bomb demanded courage, but it also demanded creativity. A rigid approach would fail, and improvisation became a soldier's lifeline. Meanwhile, German and Italian commanders had no idea that this modest-looking device would soon upend their assumptions about armored superiority. Their tanks rolled forward with confidence, their crews trained to anticipate anti-tank rifles and conventional grenade, but not a flexible, malleable explosive that could be deployed in seconds by a single determined infantryman. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would turn skepticism into astonishment. Back at the training grounds in Aberdeen, engineers meticulously documented each test. Photographs captured soldiers in mid-throw, the Gammon Bomb arcing gracefully through the air. Diagrams showed placement strategies, demonstrating how even a small amount of plastic explosive could immobilize a medium tank in moments. These records would later serve as vital references for units deploying to Tobruk, El Alamein, and beyond. Every detail mattered: the amount of explosive, the shape of the bomb, even the angle at which it struck. It was science and courage combined, a delicate choreography between human hands and lethal chemistry. The Gammon Bomb's journey from prototype to battlefield legend was a reflection of a larger truth about World War II. Innovation often came from necessity, and ingenuity could come from the most unexpected places. In the chaos of war, where survival hung by a thread, the smallest ideas could have the largest impact. A flexible rubber device, scoffed at by many, would soon demonstrate that sometimes the deadliest weapons were also the simplest, and that courage, paired with creativity, could rewrite the rules of engagement. As dawn broke over Tobruk on that March morning, a quiet tension filled the streets. Soldiers gripped their rifles, hearts pounding in rhythm with the distant drone of engines. Among them, some carried the unassuming Gammon Bombs, ready to test their mettle against steel. They did not yet know that in just minutes, these small mock devices would change the course of a skirmish, destroying tanks and shattering assumptions. The question hung in the air like the morning mist: could this simple bomb really turn the tide against mechanized death? History would answer with a clarity that laughter could no longer obscure. 7:18, March 14, 1942. The sun had risen higher over Tobruk, casting harsh light on the streets that were still slick with early morning dew. The scent of scorched sand and engine oil hung heavy in the air, mixed with the acrid tang of spent gunpowder. Somewhere down a narrow alley, the metallic thrum of a tank engine rumbled like a heartbeat, and the clatter of boots echoed across broken stone. In the chaos, a small group of British infantry crouched behind a ruined wall, hands trembling not from fear alone, but from anticipation. They were about to put the Gammon Bomb to its first real test. Corporal James McAllister, a wiry Scottish soldier with a reputation for nerves of steel, held the small, rubbery device in his hands. To the untrained eye, it looked fragile, almost soft like a toy. Yet in those hands, it was a weapon that could level steel. McAllister had trained for weeks, learning how to mold it, wedge it, and arm it under the most extreme conditions. Each movement had to be precise, each throw calculated. Mistakes were fatal. The first tank emerged from the haze, a Panzer III, its turret swiveling. With mechanical confidence, unaware of the danger inching closer, soldiers whispered instructions: wait for the right moment now. McAllister hurled the Gammon Bomb with all his strength, the pliable explosive arcing through the air, landing with a muted thud against the tank's side. A tense silence followed. Then, a muted explosion, the roar of burning fuel, the staccato crunch of metal tearing apart. The tank shuddered, its treads twisted, rendering it immobile. The other soldiers froze for a heartbeat, disbelief etched on their faces. They had all laughed at the device during training, joking that it looked like a rubber egg. But now, staring at the crippled Panzer, laughter was impossible. The Gammon Bomb had delivered in ways no one could have predicted. Less than 10 minutes later, a second tank appeared, this one heavier, a Panzer IV, pushing forward with calculated menace. McAllister and his team had no time to reconsider. They molded another Gammon Bomb, adjusting its shape to fit snugly under the tank's track. Each second stretched, the tension almost unbearable. The throw landed perfectly, the plastic explosive clinging like a second skin. And once again, the tank halted, its movement arrested as smoke and fire began to curl from its underbelly. The soldiers' hearts pounded, adrenaline surging. In 10 short minutes, two tanks, symbols of unstoppable enemy power, had been neutralized by the same small, ridiculed device. Word of this small-scale triumph spread rapidly. Letters home, reports to command, and whisper among units began to transform the Gammon Bomb from a mocked novelty into a tactical legend. Soldiers who had once doubted it now carried multiple bombs, experimenting with creative applications. Some wedged them in gaps between tank armor, others used them to collapse wooden bridges, derail trucks, or destroy fortified machine gun positions. The versatility was unparalleled. Interestingly, the psychological effect on enemy troops was immediate. German and Italian crews had been trained to respect mines, rifles, and artillery, but these bombs were unpredictable. They could strike from any angle, in any urban alley, or even from behind a seemingly innocuous wall. Reports later recorded crews panicking at sudden, unexplained detonations, unsure whether they faced mines, artillery, or some entirely new British contraption. Fear, the most subtle of weapons, had been amplified by something no one had thought serious enough to cause harm. The soldiers' ingenuity didn't stop there. Field reports describe an early instance where a team, pressed for time, improvised a gammon bomb deployment by stuffing the explosive into a discarded milk can. The can was tossed into a narrow street where an Italian L6 40th Light Tank had stalled. Seconds later, the explosion disabled the engine, forcing the crew to abandon the vehicle. These on-the-fly innovations highlighted not just the bomb's design brilliance, but the human adaptability that turned ordinary infantry into battlefield engineers. Even officers who had originally doubted the device began reconsidering. Brigadier General Alfred Clark, overseeing operations in Tobruk, later noted in his memoirs that initial skepticism had given way to cautious admiration. He described watching small teams employ the bombs in ways that defied conventional military doctrine, turning seemingly hopeless engagements into decisive victories. Beyond battlefield deployment, the Gammon Bomb had an unexpected influence on tactics and training. Command units began drills specifically designed to maximize the bomb's effectiveness. Soldiers learned to approach tanks from blind spots, mold explosives in seconds, and even use decoys to lure enemy armor into traps. Manuals were updated, diagrams drawn, and illustrations published, creating a systematic approach to a weapon that had begun as almost whimsical. The effectiveness of the Gammon Bomb was also deeply tied to human courage. Unlike artillery or fixed defenses, its success required soldiers to get close, often within yards of deadly tanks bristling with machine guns. Every throw carried risk. Memoirs from the North African campaign describe hands trembling, hearts racing, and minds calculating probabilities in real time. The combination of mechanical knowledge, psychological resilience, and precise execution made each detonation a testament to human ingenuity under pressure. An interesting anecdote involves Sergeant William Harding, who later recounted a night mission near El Adam. His team had only 3 Gammon bombs left and faced a half-track and 2 armored vehicles. Moving under the cover of darkness, they approached silently, using debris for cover, and placed the explosives in rapid succession. The results were spectacular. 1 vehicle burned, the half-track overturned, and the remaining tank retreated in disarray. Harding described it as less about the bombs and more about understanding the enemy's rhythm. The bombs were just the final nudge. The flexibility of the Gammon Bomb also forced changes in enemy tactics. German and Italian armored commanders became cautious, altering patrol patterns, moving slower, and often calling in infantry support to scout ahead. While the bombs were small in size, their impact was disproportionate in effect. Entire platoons had to rethink engagement protocols, shifting the dynamics of armored warfare in localized theaters. Meanwhile, back at Aberdeen, engineers meticulously analyzed reports from the front. Each detonation, each failed throw, was logged and studied. Adjustments were made to fuse timing, explosive density, and casing thickness. This iterative process made the Gammon Bomb not just a battlefield tool, but a continuous, evolving instrument of war, improved by the feedback loop of combat experience. Soldiers in the field and engineers at home were united in purpose. Small, clever devices could challenge even the most formidable tanks. Beyond tactical considerations, the Gammon Bomb also captured the imagination of soldiers and civilians alike. Propaganda, photographs, letters, and articles highlighted its ingenuity. While modest compared to tanks or aircraft, it symbolized a new approach to warfare where brains could sometimes outmatch brawn, and courage could leverage even the smallest tools into instruments of significant destruction. Yet, the human cost was never far from the surface. Stories persisted of soldiers misjudging timing, of bombs detonating too early or too late. Injuries were common, and fatalities not unheard of. Each success was balanced by the constant awareness that the line between triumph and tragedy was thin. Memoirs from the era frequently reflect a mixture of pride and grief, celebrating victories while mourning lost comrades. And still, the Gammon Bomb became part of the lore of Tobruk. Its early victories against Panzer III and IV tanks demonstrated not just technical innovation, but the profound impact of human adaptability. In a matter of minutes, 2 tanks were neutralized, laughter turned to awe, and soldiers gained a renewed sense of possibility. The device had proven itself. It was no longer a curious rubbery object, but a respected instrument of war. As the day wore on, reports continued to arrive from other sectors. Small teams deployed the bombs in ambushes, alleyway engagements, and even during retreat operations. Each account reinforced the same lesson. Cleverness and courage could level the playing field against overwhelming mechanized power. Soldiers began carrying multiple bombs, improvising tactics, and mentoring newer recruits in the art of precise placement. Tobruk, long under siege, had found an unexpected ally in an unassuming, flexible explosive. By dusk, the streets were quiet, scorched tracks marking where tanks had once roamed with impunity. The Gammon Bomb's legend had been forged in fire, dust, and steel. Soldiers, officers, and engineers alike began to understand that this little device, once dismissed, could dictate the tempo of battle in its sector. And for the men who had thrown those first bombs, the sight of immobilized enemy tanks was a mix of awe, relief, and grim satisfaction. The question lingered as night fell over Tobruk: if such a simple device could devastate 2 tanks in 10 minutes, how many more lives could it save or endanger over the coming months? The story of the Gammon Bomb was far from over. 10:32, March 15, 1942. The desert sun blazed overhead, relentless and unforgiving, reflecting off sand and steel alike. Tobruk's streets were littered with wreckage from previous skirmishes, tanks twisted and blackened, dust curling in the hot wind, the air heavy with smoke and the faint, acrid smell of burned fuel. Soldiers moved cautiously, their boots kicking up grit as they navigated rubble-strewn alleys. Somewhere nearby, the metallic growl of a Panzer IV broke the tense silence, a reminder that danger could arrive at any moment. For Corporal James McAllister and his team, the morning would bring their most daring mission yet. Intelligence had spotted a column of enemy armor preparing to flank Allied positions. Their orders were clear: neutralize as many tanks as possible before reinforcements arrived. But what made this mission terrifying wasn't just the number of vehicles, it was that the team would have to approach them under open desert fire, relying solely on speed, ingenuity, and the Gammon Bomb. The soldiers approached cautiously, using the undulated dunes and scattered debris for cover. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. The first tank, a Panzer III, emerged over a small rise, its machine gun sweeping methodically. MC Allister molded a Gammon Bomb, adjusting the shape so it could cling to the track mechanism. He waited, counting in his head, 1, 2, 3, and threw. The explosive landed perfectly, searing heat and smoke immediately consuming the tank's underbelly. The crew scrambled, retreating to avoid the flames while the vehicle lay immobilized. The second tank, heavier and faster, barreled forward, unaware of the trap. Private Leonard Hughes, another veteran of Tobruk's sieges, had positioned himself along the tank's path. With a practiced flick of the wrist, he hurled the Gammon Bomb, watching as it adhered to the track assembly. Moments later, the vehicle shuddered violently, smoke rising, treads twisted. The desert, which had seemed hostile and endless, now echoed with the roar of destroyed machinery and the collective gasps of soldiers witnessing the spectacle. The success, however, did not come without risk. Machine gun fire erupted from a distant building. Bullets pinged off rubble, close enough to throw sand into faces and sting exposed skin. Yet the soldiers pressed on, moving as a single coordinated unit, each placement of the bomb precise, deliberate, and fatal to the enemy armor. Within 10 minutes, 2 more tanks were neutralized, leaving the flank effectively immobilized. The mission was over almost as quickly as it had begun, but its impact would resonate far longer. This small-scale action encapsulated the broader genius of the Gammon Bomb. Its real power wasn't just the explosions it caused, but how it amplified human skill, creativity, and courage. Soldiers could improvise, adapt, and execute under circumstances where conventional weapons would fail. Memoirs from the North African campaign repeatedly describe a sense of awe at how a simple rubber casing filled with plastic explosive could render formidable tanks helpless. Engineers, soldiers, and commanders alike came to recognize that success depended as much on human initiative as on the device itself. Meanwhile, enemy forces began adapting to the threat, yet their responses were often slow and ineffective. Reports describe tank crews deploying extra infantry scouts, reinforcing flanks, and cautiously maneuvering through streets, all while remaining unnervingly aware that a single well-placed gammon bomb could disrupt their plans in seconds. Fear, amplified by unpredictability, became a silent companion of armored crews across the theater. The stories of heroism and improvisation continued. One account describes a soldier who, spotting an enemy half-track on a narrow road, hurled a gammon bomb into the vehicle's engine compartment. The explosion was immediate, the vehicle incapacitated, forcing the crew to abandon it. That soldier, under fire, retrieved another bomb from his kit, preparing for the next target. The cycle of tension, ingenuity, and lethal execution was repeated across Tobruk, cementing the device's legendary status. Interestingly, the gammon bomb also inspired innovations beyond its initial design. Soldiers began experimenting with tripwire detonation, remote arming technique, and even combinations with incendiary devices to maximize damage. Field reports detailed elaborate ambushes using a single soldier and a handful of bombs to neutralize multiple vehicles. The ingenuity wasn't just military, it was human, a testament to adaptability under extreme conditions. Even beyond the battlefield, the bomb's impact resonated in military strategy. Commanders began incorporating small, flexible explosives into broader planning, using them to shape enemy movement, control choke points, and protect infantry in urban warfare scenarios. The gammon bomb became a force multiplier, transforming ordinary soldiers into effective anti-tank units. Its presence alone forced adversaries to rethink tactics, slowing advances and creating opportunities for counterattacks. The climactic moments of Tobruk demonstrated the convergence of invention and courage. Soldiers, facing overwhelming mechanized force, leveraged ingenuity to neutralize tanks that had once seemed invincible. Each successful placement of a gammon bomb was a carefully choreographed act of bravery, calculation, and precision, a dance between human skill and lethal chemistry. In these moments, laughter at the device's absurd appearance became irrelevant. The reality of its power was undeniable. Even in retrospect, the human element remains most striking. Memoirs repeatedly emphasize that while the bomb was essential, it was the people who wielded it who made the difference. Soldiers who improvised placements under fire, who molded explosives in moments of extreme stress, and who coordinated attacks with split-second timing exemplified the essence of adaptive warfare. The gammon bomb was a tool, but its true impact was realized through human courage and creativity. As the day faded into evening, Tobruk settled into an uneasy quiet. Smoke still rose from crippled tanks, the air thick with dust and acrid residue. Soldiers reflected on the day's events, a mixture of fatigue, relief, and grim satisfaction settling over them. They had faced what seemed an unstoppable armored force, and prevailed, using ingenuity and small, unassuming tools. The gammon bomb had proven that even the simplest devices, when paired with human skill, could alter the course of a battle. Back in Aberdeen, engineers pored over field reports, photographs, and sketches, refining designs for future campaigns. Every placement, every detonation, every improvisation was analyzed, recorded, and improved. The gammon bomb was evolving not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of wartime innovation, resilience, and the unpredictable brilliance of ordinary soldiers. The story of the gammon bomb teaches a broader lesson about conflict, courage, and creativity. It reminds us that innovation often comes from necessity, that under the harshest conditions, small ideas can have outsized effects. It illustrates how human ingenuity can challenge assumptions, rewrite tactical rules, and instill fear in even the most confident adversaries. And it demonstrates, above all, that courage, the willingness to act decisively under extreme pressure, is as crucial as any technological advantage. In the end, the gammon bomb was more than an anti-tank device. It was a testament to the adaptability of the human mind and the resilience of those who refused to accept impossibility. Soldiers who had once laughed at it now carried it with reverence, knowing that their survival and their ability to protect comrades depended on skill, courage, and the clever application of a seemingly humble tool. As night fell over the desert, with stars piercing the black sky, one could almost sense the quiet pride of those soldiers. They had turned skepticism into triumph, transformed fear into action, and, in the process, left a legacy that modern military historians still study. The gammon bomb, mocked and underestimated, had earned its place in history, reminding us that sometimes the smallest, most overlooked innovations can change everything. And for viewers reflecting on this story today, perhaps there is a lesson beyond the battlefield. Creativity, courage, and determination paired with even the simplest tools can overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. The Gammon Bomb was small, flexible, and unassuming. Yet in the hands of those who dared to use it, it was unstoppable. So next time you see something that seems insignificant, perhaps you'll remember Tobruk in March 1942, and how laughter turned to awe in the face of courage, ingenuity, and a small, deadly rubbery device. What other overlooked ideas might hold the power to change the course of events if only someone has the courage to try? The Gammon Bomb's story ends not with a bang, but with reflection, a quiet testament to the power of human creativity under pressure. A reminder that even in the darkest moments of war, innovation and courage can light a path forward.